In today's Locked On Pelicans, I'll tell you how their next preseason game being canceled will affect the team's preparation for the new season, and why is Brandon Ingram not going to play? Plus, we're expecting to see real growth from Willie Green, and I'll tell you how in the Thursday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcast and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on this Thursday, day before what was supposed to be the Pelicans' second preseason game, but it is canceled. I'll give you the latest on that. We'll look at the status for their game on Sunday against the Miami Heat, which could be up in the air, and how it's going to affect the team's preparation for the start of the regular season. And then, is it weird that Brandon Ingram isn't going to play until the final preseason game? We'll look at all of that. Plus, let's get into growth from head coach Willie Green, because I do think you're already seeing it, and it's a very, very good thing for this year. Plus, a little bit of trade talk and some ranking talk in the third segment of today's show. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. Today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. So, and become an everydayer. Listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans, because a lot of things we've been telling you on here have been coming to fruition as we've seen so far in this offseason and in the run-up to the regular season here. But let's get into the biggest news of the day, and that is the Pelicans having a game canceled. It was announced, the National Basketball Association announced that the New Orleans at Orlando preseason game scheduled for Friday, October 11th has been canceled. That is obviously because of Hurricane Milton. There's no need to play a preseason basketball game or any sporting event when something of that magnitude is going on. So first and foremost, this is the correct decision, and I hope if anyone is a listener from that area that you are taking care of yourself and only sending good thoughts your way, as that storm looked very, very scary for a period of time. And we know all about that here in South Louisiana and the Gulf Coast area. The next question then becomes, will they end up playing against the Miami Heat on Sunday? That game is scheduled for Sunday the 13th at 3:30 p.m. Eastern, 2:30 here in New Orleans. I'm not sure. I think it's too early to know what that will look like. From what I had seen, Miami wasn't really in the path of the hurricane, getting hit with a lot of things like that. But maybe you need to deploy those resources elsewhere, the people that would just be working the game, having first responders there, whether it's just EMS and other things at that sort of game. Would it be better to use them elsewhere for all of this right now? So it remains to be seen if that's going to end up happening. It is going to be a very safe bet that the Pelicans will play the Rockets on Tuesday, October 15th in their final preseason game before the October 23rd opening night game against the Chicago Bulls. If they were to lose one or two, they've lost one preseason game, say they were to lose two, it hurts them a little bit. Now, looking at it in the grand scheme of what's happening, it's like a first world problem kind of thing. So I'm not going to complain. This game being canceled does not appear that it's going to be rescheduled. So I think if they end up playing the Heat and then the Rockets, it'll just be 3 preseason games instead of 4. I don't see this game getting made up in any sort of capacity, nor does it really need to be. Losing some preseason games hurts, certainly does, for the preparation. But I think when you're looking at this team and what they were trying to do, these 2 games maybe don't matter as much. And that goes to something that Willie Green said the other day, which was that Brandon Ingram isn't going to be playing until the final preseason game, according to head coach Willie Green. He did not play in the game against the Orlando Magic. That one was mainly due to rest, and it sounds like this was a collective decision. Maybe there's some fatigue there for Brandon Ingram. That could mean a number of different things. We can speculate. We don't need to do that. We will a little bit here. But overall, as long as he's getting some run with the first unit, I think I'll be fine with this. By all accounts, from everyone I've talked to, he has looked good in training camp. He is in shape. He is doing all of the right things of playing aggressive, getting to the rim, shooting threes, which is what we've wanted to see from him. And so as long as he's doing that in training camp, where they were having 2 a day, sometimes like 3 runs a day, yeah, him being a little bit tired maybe makes some sense. I do wonder if it lends the question of, was he as active in the offseason as we wanted to see him be? Does this have something to do with maybe like a lack of game shape? I don't know. We don't really need to go there with all of it. But certainly as long as they're getting some run in the final game, the quick little tune-up with live ball reps against a team that maybe you're going to be fighting with for the playoffs in the Houston Rockets is more than enough. Zion Williamson looks as good as he does. You worry less about the other guys because it's kind of Zion, right? It's his team. I said that on the show the other day. They're going to go as far as him being healthy and his explosiveness and like just talent takes them. Ingram compared to him is not on the same level. It's just a reality of the situation. Still a very talented player, still a very good player. And as long as he's fitting in, doing more catch and shoot, other things, and they're kind of running the offense through Zion, through Murray, they'll be just fine if they don't get all of these extra reps in a game. They'll practice, they'll go through some simulated games and things like that. And I think that's ultimately just as good when it comes down to it. The starters playing 20 minutes in a game is nice, but it's not the end of the world if you miss 20 minutes of live ball reps for an NBA team. They know what they're doing. That's going to be the really important thing for them, I think. And that's ultimately what you'll end up seeing happen. If, the game against the Rockets will be fine. And if you think about it, right, this game here on the 11th, on the 13th, that's over 10 days, 2 weeks away from the first regular season game. What does good does like those live ball reps do there that you wouldn't get in practice or like kind of like lose in that 2 weeks till you get to your next game? So I think they're going to be just fine. I do not think that this is, they've got a trade lined up for Brandon Ingram. I think it's probably precautionary that you can't risk an injury in a preseason game for him in games that don't matter. It'd be different in the regular season. So I bet that plays a part of it that, does he want to go out and risk an injury if you're him fighting for a new deal? Because if he has something catastrophic happens, misses a season, his money's gone at that point. If you're the Pelicans and you might want to trade him, knowing there's a delicate balance here, you don't need to risk that. If he gets hurt and misses season, you can't move him at that point in time. And now everyone loses here. So him playing in the preseason is kind of lose-lose for everybody. You want him to get that run. You want him to be, on the same page as these guys, but you can do all of that in practice. So I don't really think this impacts much. Maybe this is just a good time for the team to bond, stay home, get a little bit more well-rested. All of that, I think, is going to be a very good thing for them on opening night. And if Zion looks like he did, if the guys play like they do, I think this team will be fine. And losing 1 or maybe 2 preseason games doesn't ultimately matter for this team. They're NBA players. They know what they're doing. What's going to lead them to hopefully a lot of success is growth from head coach Willie Green. You're seeing some of it in action already. You saw some of it in the first preseason game. I think you're going to see a bunch of it this year, particularly around three-point shooting. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans and some trade talk in the third segment of today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Game Time. This is my go-to ticketing app, and I love it because there are so many features. They just take the guesswork out of buying tickets. There's no uncertainty, anything like that. My new favorite feature, Game Time Picks, which makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. They're just going to show you the good prices on the seats that you want. And if you're going to a venue you've never been, maybe it's a theater show, concert, comedy, someplace you don't normally go to, they have the view from your seat before you buy, so you're going to know exactly what you're getting. You're getting the exact seats that you want. I did that when I went to the Saints-Rams game last season at SoFi. Never been there before. Wanted good seats. Got good seats on Game Time with $20 off because I looked at the view from the seats. It made it super easy. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans. And now for your second listen, Locked On NBA. It's going to be expanded a bunch this year. I'm excited about that. Get just everything you need to know about the NBA, about the association, the games, the biggest storylines, all in one spot in 30 minutes or less on the Locked On NBA podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So let's get into head coach Willie Green, because this is something that we are going to be monitoring here at Locked On Pelicans for the whole season. This is a bit of a prove-it year for him. I said when I did a show of like 3 shocking things that I think could happen this year, one of them is head coach Willie Green gets fired by January. Willie Green, I think, is a good motivator of people. I do think he deserves to be a head coach, should be a head coach. He's had taken the Pelicans to the playoffs in 2 out of his 3 years, even if you have to go through the play-in tournament route, and even if they haven't reached their full potential. No one else has really ever done that for the team. There's just been a lot of success here in New Orleans with this franchise. Willie Green having 2 playoff trips is kind of elite company at that point in time. But they do feel like this team has underwhelmed during his tenure as well. There are just some things we know about Willie Green, playing kind of the vets that maybe remind him of himself, or defensive-focused guys that just don't fit NBA basketball in 2024. There are some limitations to him. We need to see those change this year. I think him getting fired is much easier to do this season than it was last year. He's got 1 more year left on his deal after this one. That makes it, you can move on from him like just way easier. It's as simple as that. So he needs to show some growth this year and not be the stepping stone head coach for, the next head coach that hopefully can lead the Pelicans to a lot of success. And I think you're starting to see that. So one of the big criticisms is we wanted him to skew a little bit more offensively, correct? So I do think he is doing that. Willie Green talked after practice the other day in terms of the 3-point shooting. Here's what he said. He said, quote, "I'm growing offensively, that those are good shots for us, those 3-point shots. Just becoming more comfortable with knowing that those are great looks for us, having our guys prepared to take those shots and take them with confidence. And for myself, from the sideline, when they miss a couple, I've got to still be okay with that." End quote. That's a really important quote here, and I think that's telling to Willie Green. He didn't like early shots, threes in transition. He did not like certain guys taking wide open looks. I don't want to say was against 3-pointers. He was a 3-point shooter himself. But at times he probably wanted to slow things down, work the ball around for a better shot, and that always isn't the case. It'd be different if you didn't have Zion Williamson as your best player. If you had Steph Curry who shoots threes, it's an entirely different offense. But with Zion there, you need that spacing. You need to almost go 4-5 out around him. And Willie Green hasn't always done that. But for him to realize, if you get an open 3, take it. That's a really important thing. And that shows growth from head coach Willie Green. And look at the green light that Jordan Hawkins had in that first preseason game. Shooting the ball exceptionally well. He's been lights out in training camp, as we've told you here. Willie Green said this about him, quote, "He's got the green light. If you see daylight, let it go. We all trust that he'll make good decisions," end quote. This wasn't the case for Jordan Hawkins last year. There wasn't a lot of trust from Willie Green in Jordan Hawkins last year, hence his playing time being very much up and down as the season went on. 35, 34-point game against Dallas, plays a little bit, then all of a sudden not at all. And there didn't seem to be a rhyme or reason for it, and it was probably just a lack of trust. Willie Green trusted other guys to be out there on the court. That had proven to be wrong. Garrett Temple, Tony Snell come to mind as those kind of guys over younger guys that they need to develop that have higher ceilings that probably were just better than those guys, even if they would make a mistake here and there. But Willie Green seems to be willing to trust the players more. It sounds like he's trusting the process. Oh, I hate using that, but you get what I mean. He's listening to Coach James Borrego more, and even talked about that the other day, saying Borrego is saying these are good, and he's like, I'm letting go some of the control, essentially. I'm paraphrasing. And that Borrego is like, we got to do this, and he's buying in. So Willie Green is showing growth with that. Zion said the other day, he said, the message has been pretty clear to get up at least 43s a game. That means we've got to play with pace. In the grand scheme of things, it's definitely going to be a positive for us. So this leads to the next point. How do you get those 43s? Will Guillory wrote an article on The Athletic about it the other day, which is really good. You should read that. You should subscribe there and to NOLA.com. But he went into some of the sets, but one of the things I wanted to get into here was pace. That's what I thought was really interesting, where Zion says that means we've got to play with pace. Part of playing, so I use a stat called pace a lot, and we'll do an advanced stat show that's even just a bonus show or something like that. But I don't think people truly know what that means. So teams play different styles. Some play fast, some play slow. And pace is a way of kind of trying to figure that out. So pace essentially is just a measure of how many. So here's the literal definition of it. Pace factor is an estimate of the number of possessions per 48 minutes by a team. Per 48 minutes. In a game of basketball, how many possessions do you have? It's as simple as that. It's a measure of the number of possessions, not how quick you're taking shots, not how quickly you move the ball around or anything like that. How many possessions do you get per game? More possessions, more opportunities to score. Simple as that. Now, team that plays fast, more possessions, just ripping shots, maybe shots that aren't good and you're missing them a bunch, doesn't mean you have a better offense. So when I use things like offensive rating and defensive rating, those factor in pace as a way to try and really look at teams and try and equalize them. If one team, that's why I don't like points per possession or points per game. If one team plays fast, they should have more points per game. But does that mean they're better than a team that scores fewer points per game but plays slower? So you're trying to get down to points per possession, which is essentially what offensive and defensive rating are. It's done over 100 possessions, so it equalizes it. For a fast-paced team and a slow-paced team, you can compare their numbers across the board. For the Pelicans to get up more threes, they are going to need to have more possessions per game, playing fast. Taking shots early in the shot clock is going to mean the other team gets the ball, and then that's going to give you a chance to get it quicker. Think of something like a 2-for-1 opportunity at the end of a quarter or the half. Well, if you can get 2 possessions to their 1, you have 2 chances to score to their 1, and if you make both of yours and they make theirs, you're still ahead, so you can net gain some points that way. That's kind of when you start to look at pace and when it gets interesting. So the Pelicans here, and that's why in a 2-for-1, if a team realizes it, they might take a shot like 5 seconds into the shot clock, knowing that they'll have some time left because of the amount of time left on the scoreboard there. So, and we're getting a little afield from all this, and it's not tangential, but I'm not explaining it the best either, I don't think. Although I didn't think I did it bad. So what Zion is saying here is we got to play with pace. They need to take shots earlier in the shot clock. If you pass the ball and someone's open, it's just take the shot. Don't just take a shot to take a shot, but if you get Jordan Hawkins and you pass it to him, and the opponent left him open, take it. That's a good shot because he's a good shooter. Play with pace like that. Take those shots early in the shot clock, hustle back on defense, force a turnover, hopefully, come down, take another shot. If you play slow, aren't going to get close to 43s per game because Zion is your highest usage guy. And so if he's using the majority of your possessions and you aren't, and he's not shooting threes because he's not going to take that many, you're not going to be able to get threes elsewhere. So Zion needs to get his, and so you're going to need to take shots quickly in the shot clock to just generate the number of threes otherwise. Zion used, when he was on the court, about 30% of the Pelicans' possessions last season. That is a very high number. So you need to generate those threes through playing fast. That's what I thought was so interesting about that comment. That, to me, says what they're going to do offensively is let those guys shoot, and if they miss, it's okay because it's, in general, part of the game plan. This is the process that they are going through and what they're trying to do right now. Willie Green needs to stick by this. If you're like, play fast, let's get 43s, and Hawkins has a game where he misses a couple, you can't just pull him. It's part of the process. You have to look at it not just on a 1-game sample size, but a large sample size here. But Willie Green is saying the right things. And if he's not going to just yank guys and he's going to trust the process, trust that what they're doing here is the right thing, they can get close-ish to that 43s per game number. I'm not sure if they entirely will, but I do think they can get somewhat close to that. But they are going to have to play fast. That means threes in transition. Take those if you get them. They're called Pujits, pull-up jumpers in transition. They are back-breaking shots. When you get a steal and you're running in on the fast break, someone's flanking down the wing from the ball handler, they kick it out to him for a wide-open three-pointer and they make it. Oh, that breaks another team. It gets the crowd going wild for that sort of thing. They're going to need to do a lot of that this year if they want to hit that 43-point mark. That's going to really be the key to it, along with Brandon Ingram shooting threes, DeJounte Murray shooting threes, Zion taking a couple here and there, Herb Jones adding some volume and all of that. But this is an achievable milestone mark for the Pelicans. So that is encouraging that Willie Green gets that, and I think that's the start of seeing some real growth from the Pelicans head coach. So we're going to switch gears in the next segment here. Let's get into a little bit of trade talk. Miles Turner, I want to look at some rankings too. Don't expect Miles Turner, and I'll tell you why. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel. NBA fans, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. So when you get the hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. You can do that right now for the Pelicans season. Opening night line is there, -6.5 over the Chicago Bulls. Maybe that'll change because of a lack of preseason games. Who knows? Go put $5 down on that right now. I'm feeling good about opening night. Pels do well on opening night. And then you're going to get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed. All you got to do is go to FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans. I got all of the things wrong here. Hold on. There we go. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. We are the #1 Pelicans podcast for a reason. And now for your second listen, new Saints starting QB. Sign me up. But is Spencer Rattler actually going to be good? Ross Jackson, host of Locked On Saints, he's going to tell you what to expect, what the playbook's going to look like, what are the Saints' chances on Sunday. I'm just excited for some fresh blood in there. Look, we don't want injuries at all to Derek Carr. We hope he recovers soon, but I'm excited to see the young guy here in action. Go listen to Locked On Saints. Make them your second listen today. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Okay, let's look at some trade talk here. Miles Turner was a name that someone mentioned in the comments yesterday. As I said, kind of trade targets maybe are drying up a little bit. And I didn't mention Turner for a reason. I don't think he's available. I think when you look at some of these teams and some of the big names that you maybe want the Pelicans to go out after a center, it's not going to be Miles Turner. The best chance is maybe a guy like Jared Allen. Even though he signed that extension with Cleveland, he can still be dealt a day or two before the NBA's trade deadline. Miles Turner, I don't think is going anywhere. People are expecting the Indiana Pacers to potentially be a top 4 seed in the East. And while Turner is an expiring deal, he doesn't have a contract next season, he's not extension eligible either right now. So they can't do anything until the end of the regular season. I think they have all intention of bringing him back. That Pacers team is young. They're fun. They're led by a really great player in Tyrese Halliburton. And Miles Turner just complements him so unbelievably well. Now, there's a period when I wasn't a big Turner fan. I've kind of come around on him. I think at times he's slightly overrated for what he gives you. But the 3-point shooting and blocks would be very much what this team needs. But it's not something they have to have. Their defense, particularly now with DeJounte Murray, is about preventing people from getting into the paint. If you don't allow people into the paint, you don't need rim protection. That's been their case for the past couple of years. So that in and of itself is kind of a form of rim protection, just not the one that is shot blocking and those sorts of things. So I just don't see a world where he gets dealt. I think the price would be really high. The money, unless you're trading CJ McCollum, doesn't really work out for New Orleans in any sort of capacity. And I don't think that's something that New Orleans wants to do. Maybe if they get desperate, things could change. Maybe if things go really wrong for the Indiana Pacers, that could be the case too. But I just don't see any sort of deal where it would work out around Miles Turner whatsoever here. And That's unfortunate because I'd actually like him in New Orleans, but not the case. David Griffin is a big Miles Turner fan, I believe. I think I can say that. And I just don't see how a trade would happen. You're looking at smaller trade targets. I even think a guy like DeAndre Ayton would be really tough to do and bring in here to New Orleans. So that's why we're looking at guys that are $15 million or so. You know, Jose signing that extension, I don't want him traded, but that does make it easier to maybe cobble money together for a $15 million player. So you can kind of find a world where some of that works. But Miles Turner's probably not going to be a guy that the Pelicans can get just because he's so valuable to, you know, his current team, the Indiana Pacers, when it comes to all of that. So I also want to look at some rankings from the Action Network. At HP Basketball, Matt Moore, who is one of the hosts of the Locked On Nuggets podcast, also hosts Locked On NBA too, does a lot of their rankings and a lot of things. He's one of like the smarter basketball people out there, in my opinion. I really like and listen to what he has to say. He had a number of players for the Pelicans ranked in the top 100 of their rankings. And we talked about the CBS ones the other day, Pelicans having 6 guys in there. One guy he was super high on, by the way, was Jose Alvarado. You're going to find maybe not a bigger outside of New Orleans Jose Alvarado fan than Matt Moore, which is really great to see. They also had Ingram ranked. They had CJ just outside of it, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, DeJounte Murray, Zion, and Ingram as well. It goes to what I was saying in yesterday's show. This team has a lot of talent here, and people are really questioning how it all fits, which I think is kind of funny because this team has so much talent, yet everyone's like they're a playing tournament team. No one's kind of putting them outside that range. The GM survey had them at 7. And it goes back to what we said of like trying to figure out if this team's going to be successful or not is tough. I think they will. There's just so much talent here, and I don't think they need like an elite starting center. I think maybe you can get by with Daniel Tice, particularly seeing them use him as a wing a little bit, and at times as a big man too, but you get what I'm saying. People just recognize the talent on here, but they struggle to see how it all works and how it all fits, particularly for how clunky Zion and Ingram were together last season. So they still feel like some change needs to happen. I believe that change can be with Ingram. He can shoot more threes. He can play a different style. And if he does that, that's change because he's not who he was last year. Will he do that? I'm not sure. We'll find out maybe in the final preseason game. But overall, I do still believe in this team. Now, that might be a little bit homerish of me, but the talent is here. And if they can figure it out, if you're getting that growth from head coach Willie Green, you don't need to make a big name trade for a center. Roll with this team, maybe duck the luxury tax somehow, even though they should pay it. And I think you'll be just fine. But it's gonna be a really interesting season. We're gonna have no shortage of storylines and things to talk about. So I hope you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube as well, because we're gonna have a lot of content coming for y'all this season. So that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. Tomorrow, we're going to get into some of your questions, do a little bit of a mailbag. There were a couple of really good ones. If you got a question, put them in the comments down below. Good chance they're going to be used here on the show for tomorrow. No game Friday, so no quick recap or anything like that. Next game on Sunday. We'll be talking about it on Monday. Hopefully on Sunday. Whatever happens, we'll be talking about it on Monday then too. So a lot more to come here. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. This has been the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. See y'all tomorrow.